Hello everyone and welcome to the third part of our tutorials dedicated to positioning Parallax in Godot and Escoria. In this final part we'll specifically focus on Escoria and see the little caveats of this engine. If you remember the previous episodes, you remember that the entire question that we were asking ourselves was how to move the center of the parallax other than 0, 0 coordinates. If you don't understand what that means, then you need to watch the previous videos again. And why did we want to do that? Well, that is because in Escoria, the player cannot walk at negative coordinates. As you can see, for example, in this scene slash room, it's a room because we're in Escoria, the top left is at 0, 0. And I cannot have Escoria terrain go beyond that point. It would not work. And I cannot have camera limits higher than 0, 0. I cannot have negative coordinates here. It would not work. And this is the whole reason why we want to move the parallax somewhere else. To add to that limitation, it gets even worse, because imagine that this room is a scrolling room. And maybe you don't want the player to start at the most obvious coordinates. Maybe you don't want him to start close to the top left of the room. Maybe you want him to start somewhere that would be completely outside of the viewport, because the room is really big. And of course the camera would be teleported there instantly when you enter the room. But you also want the parallax center to be there, maybe. Maybe that's what you want to be the center of the room. So we have to resolve all those issues at the same time. It will be easy. Let's start by looking our little setup. So I have a game which coordinates are 640 by 400, classic 4 by 3 ratio, aspect ratio. It's a 2D game that keeps the ratio. And just so you see, I have a little bit extended that background image. I just repeated the pattern 4 times so that we can see we keep having some background image when the player walks off the screen, so that we can see, you know, instead of having just one big gray background, this way we see where the player walks. So by the way, as you can see here, we have a rectangle representing the size of our adventure game screen. So on the ruler you can see 640 here by 400 here. So now, apart from those Escoria specific things, which are the root node being an Escoria room instead of a node 2D in our previous setup, we need to have a start location point, ESC Escoria location. I've put it, like I said I would. I put it outside of the regular screen position. For example, there, quite low in the scrolling room, and I also have an Escoria terrain here, which will let us move the player around. So let's see what happens when I start the game. Well, it seems to be working. I have a player. It starts pretty low in the room, as you can see. It starts here. The scale of the parallax is 1 on this specific layer, so it moves exactly at the same speed as the camera, so this is working pretty nicely. I don't know why there is some, it's a bit jiggery, it's a bit, how do you say in English, jittery, but that's not our concern right now. Okay, so it seems to be working. Now let's see how to move our parallax center where we wanted it to be. So like we saw in the previous episode, first thing to do is to move the base offset of the parallax background. Let's imagine that I want the center of the parallax to be in the same place as the start location. So let's have a look. For convenience, I'm going to put it in round numbers, 400 by 600. So I'm gonna use the same value here. 400, 600. And what I want is the background parallax to be completely fixed. So remember, the scale must be 0. If you don't know that, go back to the previous tutorial. I would like this one to move at the same speed as the camera, so a scale of 1. And I would like this one to move faster than the camera, so scale of 2. And maybe I'm going to add another one to move slower than the camera. So this one, I'm going to make it a bit bigger. I'm going to change its color. I'm going to make it green. And I'm going to set that speed at 0.5. So I'm all set up. I have all sorts of moving speeds. And again, I have changed the base offset of the parallax. Let's start the game. So I can see that the shifting is correct, like we saw in the previous videos. But now I'm going to need to offset the whole thing so that it starts way up there, like we see in the editor. And if we remember, we just have to apply the same base offset, just negative, to the layers. Okay, so now they are nowhere to be seen. And if the camera was wider, we could see that they would be all the way there in the top left, just like we see it in the editor. And if I walk up there, I can see them appear and I can see them shift at different speeds, like they were supposed to. So that's great. But now, so mission accomplished basically. But now I have one final tip for you, which is maybe those rectangles there, which would be most likely a sprite in your game, for example, the sprite of some distant mountains or the sprite of a lamppost in the foreground. Maybe you don't want them to be as big as the whole room or even the viewport. Maybe you just want a small sprite containing only, well, you know, smaller, like a little thing, and you still want it to be positioned properly, even though you can't use the top left of the room as a reference. Well, easy peasy. Just change the offset again. For example, if I want that green sprite to start here, well, I need to keep this as if it was the base value, and then just add to it as if there was a second offset. Let's see what happens. There you go. You see, I removed, I mean, this was 400, I added 200 to move it slightly like this. This was minus 600, I added 500 to move it down there. And now it's under the player. And it still moves with its relative speed, reduced speed. And there you go. So that's not perfect, because we would prefer it to start exactly like it is in the editor. That was our whole purpose there. How can we do that? Let me revert to minus 400, minus 600. What happens if I move the actual sprite? There. Will it be relative to the parallax layer. It absolutely is, and it works. So I did not change the offset of the parallax layer, and that's great because that's what I want to be our center. I want it to be clearly readable. However, I can move anything I want inside of the parallax layer. I can move the sprites or the whatever wherever I want using the position of it. If this was a sprite, it would be the transform X and transform Y. But there you go, mission accomplished. For example, this is a sprite, and I'm gonna move it. Is it gonna work? Yes, it is. Yes, it does. And a final thing, remember that for sprites you have a little extra trick up your sleeve, is that, okay, I don't know where it went, I seemed to remember, yes, you can make it offset or not offset, center or not center. If you want the position of the sprite to be its top left, you can decide from where you do the calculations, but you see what's important is that little cross there. So I think that pretty much wraps it up. Now you know how to position the parallax, you know to position the center of the parallax by using the base offset of the background. You know how to position each parallax center by the offset, and then you know how to position what's inside the parallax by just changing the coordinates of those individual items. There you go. Thank you for watching.